Let's return to one of the points that most bothered fans of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, the fact that Cedric Diggory became a Death Eater following the humiliation he suffered during the second task of the Triwizard Tournament. The fact that such a pure and heroic person could have fallen to the dark side hurts fans and makes them collapse in denial. But in reality, it's not so unrealistic. I've heard many people indignantly shout that Cedric would never have done it. But that's precisely the point. Betrayal hurts precisely because it comes from someone you don't expect. It's never enemies who betray you, but friends. In canon, Peter Pettigrew's betrayal is shocking precisely because no one believed Gryffindor was capable of it. And here we are at the same point. There's no point in dragging houses into the mix. So, Cedric was a Hufflepuff. So? Being a Hufflepuff doesn't mean you're good by default. Zacharias Smith is an asshole in canon and he's a Hufflepuff, as are all of Cedric's housemates who sneer at Harry in the fourth book, or those who believe Harry is a new dark wizard at age 12. Being a Hufflepuff doesn't make you a good person, just as being in other houses doesn't necessarily make you smart, brave, or evil. But beyond that, I'd like to remind you that the sorting isn't about dividing people into good and bad. This superficial distinction has been made over the years by lazy fans who have only read the series superficially or sometimes only seen the movies. Otherwise, the question, why does Slytherin house still exist, would never have been asked. Each house has the following characteristics: Gryffindor, courage, boldness, and chivalry; Ravenclaw, intelligence, knowledge, curiosity, creativity, and wit; Slytherin, ambition, leadership, self-preservation, cunning, and resourcefulness; Hufflepuff, hard work, dedication, patience, and loyalty. Now, among all these characteristics, goodness or evil is never mentioned. Slytherins don't have to be evil to be sorted into the Serpent's house, just as Hufflepuffs don't have to be good people. Furthermore, loyalty and hard work aren't the prerogatives of good. In fact, if you think about it for a second, the idea of a talented, dedicated, and extremely loyal wizard joining evil is frighteningly coherent if we assume that the path he's taking isn't evil. I can't stress it enough, any well-written character thinks he's the hero of his own story. Even Voldemort, in his own mind, thinks he's right. Cedric, in an alternate version, wouldn't join evil because he recognized it as such, but he might become close to it because he was attracted, manipulated, and deceived into thinking that Death Eaters are good. Unjustly persecuted wizards fighting to protect wizards and their traditions. Wizards who, over the years, have been forced to use extreme means in an unequal fight. Or need I remind you that the first Death Eaters were kids? The Walpurgis Knights, the precursors of the Death Eaters, went to school with Tom Riddle, and their children later joined the ranks. They were literally high school kids fighting against experienced Aurors who used unforgivable curses on them. Against adults who cheered when they managed to kill the kids behind those skull masks. How can good people consider themselves good if they brutally kill and torture? How can people be good if they lock children up for life in a prison that lets Dementors gradually strip the prisoners of their souls every day? In the English wizarding world, there's no concept of sentence reduction that would rehabilitate a criminal. And it doesn't matter whether you've killed someone or are merely suspected of a crime, like Hagrid, there's no scale of severity. The Ministry of Magic's judicial system has only one answer: Azkaban and throw away the key. And this is supposed to be the good guys' part? Can we really blame the Death Eaters for defending themselves in war? What did they do that was so terrible during the 1960s? They protested laws they deemed unjust, tried to change them, and when they were ignored, they used strong-arm tactics. No one would have wanted to go so far as to kidnap ministry officials, but those reckless people insisted on giving squibs rights and recognition. They insisted that they too were wizards, but if they didn't have powers, they couldn't live in the wizarding world. It goes against rationality. Of course, I'm exaggerating, trying to justify the unjustifiable, but in the end, that's what happens in real life too. Those with extremist views don't recognize them as such, they think they're right, and they're ready to fight for their beliefs. Just like the other side. When you cross the line and start a war, right and wrong truly become just points of view. You lose the memory of who raised their wand first, and all that remains is the harsh reality of a bloody war that has no pure winners and no evil losers, only survivors. If the first war had been won by Voldemort, he would have represented good and the Order of the Phoenix evil. We saw it in the 7th book. No one went around telling the citizens that Harry was being hunted. Public information first portrayed him as a person informed of the facts regarding Dumbledore's death, and then instilled suspicion that it was precisely that disturbed boy, who had caused so much trouble during his years at school, who had killed the headmaster. And many believed it. Manipulating a crowd is incredibly easy. Imagine doing it with a single person, humiliated, ridiculed, estranged from friends and family, thrown into the world of work, and left alone and full of resentment toward the one everyone calls a hero. It's not hard to imagine that a Death Eater, or perhaps even Voldemort himself in the shadows, approached Cedric and convinced him to follow him. I repeat, not to harm, to kill or torture just for sport, but to no longer be ridiculed, to prove to the world that Potter was a liar who stole his glory. To me, a possible descent to the dark side by Cedric is very reminiscent of Barty Crouch Jr.'s, a fall we haven't seen, left solely to the imagination. It's unknown what house Barty belonged to. Many assume he was a Ravenclaw, but as I said before, houses don't really matter much. The point is, he was a boy, the son of a ministry official, the son of someone who staunchly opposed Voldemort and the Death Eaters. No one would have expected him to join the Dark Wizard. He was persuaded to join the Death Eaters, and when he was captured, his own father drew him, sending him to Azkaban for life, a slow agony that leads to a fate worse than death. Despite his professing innocence, despite there being no proof of his actual guilt, that boy found in Voldemort a new father figure, in his own words. For Barty, Voldemort wasn't a dark wizard to be served out of fear, but a father who welcomed and guided him, perhaps giving him the approval he so craved. Cedric could fall into the same trap, with his father Amos, who was once so proud of him, embarrassing him with his unbearable pressure to excel, and suddenly struggling to look him in the face following his humiliation during the Triwizard Tournament. Furthermore, I feel compelled to echo Dumbledore's words, sometimes I think the sorting happens too soon, and while this quote irritates me a little in context and with the meaning commonly given to it by fans, in this case I find it fitting. How absurd is the idea of sorting 11-year-olds, directing them on a path that will influence their entire lives? How can anyone think they're already fully formed at 11? The person you are at that age, the ideas you have, change drastically when you come of age. And, quite simply, it's not the passing of time, but what happens to you in the meantime, and how you deal with it, that changes you. I'd like to clarify another point, too often trivialized. Cedric isn't suffering a mild, temporary humiliation limited to Hogwarts. Cedric was participating in an international tournament, the Daily Prophet even reporting on in detail. His name and his exploits will go down in history, his merits as well as his catastrophic failures. In this reality, he will be remembered as the Hogwarts champion, one of the two, and therefore already overshadowed by Harry, who emerged from the Triwizard Tournament with a swollen head. This will cost him all the points he could have earned by finishing last or in the opening round with Fleur, effectively eliminating him from the tournament unless he recovers in the maze. But we know that all the cards will be stacked against him, because, following canon, the fake Moody will favor Harry to get him the cup first. Another point that's rarely addressed, but in the meantime, Scorpius and Albus, in a desperate attempt to right the wrong track, that Ron and Hermione didn't get married in the future, and therefore Rose and Hugo were never born, set off fireworks with the words, "Ron loves Hermione," written on them. From Cedric's perspective, this only makes things worse. His losing the tournament, his being humiliated and overshadowed again, and perhaps it all ties back to Harry, given that he's Ron and Hermione's best friend. That was his chance to shine, and it was taken away from him. He'll be mocked for life, alienated by many superficial friends, who knows, maybe even Cho, and with Voldemort's resurgence, Harry will once again be the center of attention. In the canon, Cedric is truly a beautiful person, he appears altruistic, just, unloyal. Learning that even such a person has been corrupted is truly heartbreaking, but it's also a powerful message that hits us like a cold shower, precisely because deep down we know it's not so unrealistic. Let's face it, it's easy to be a wonderful person when you're beautiful, intelligent, talented, popular, and loved by everyone. But when these things you've long taken for granted are stripped away, a person can change dramatically. And this is a fundamental point of the saga. No character is perfect, everyone, even the good ones, has flaws and dark sides. People deal with humiliation differently. Some manage to face it with the support of friends, while others are sucked into it, as happened to the adolescent Severus Snape, who grew up resentful, bullied, and humiliated in the worst world in the chapter, The Worst Memory. Over time, his hatred for the good guys solidified, so much so that he joined the only faction that accepted him, the Death Eaters. In this sense, Cedric could be a tragic reminder of something that has already happened. This aspect may not be popular, but it is not at all unrealistic. In fact, I would personally find it promising if it were explored further.